choosing your battles. When we start going through this, you have to take the situation that you're dealing with, look at it objectively, and decide what is really worth fighting for. Now, the problem is, in the beginning stages of this, everything really makes you angry, and you want to hold them accountable, and you want to push back, and you want to set those appropriate boundaries. The thing is you have to really look at the situation, look at what's at stake, and decide if it's really worth it. Not everything is worth battling on. And the problem is that at the beginning stages of it, it feels like it is, right? Because these people are pushing you into a corner. They're messing with your emotions. Maybe they're manipulating your finances, manipulating your children's, manipulating your own emotions against you, and you get sick of it, and you want it to stop, and you want to fight back, and you try to find a way to fight back. Now, typically in our situations, the only really way that it seems like to do that is back through family court, is to hold them accountable for violating a court order, which is typically what the deal is, or you didn't have it written, so they're not necessarily violating a court order, but it's something that's causing a problem, and you feel you need to have it addressed and rectified. Now, sometimes you have to do it. Sometimes, you do get back into a corner, and the issue is so important to you that it's worth fighting. Now, the one thing, and I've talked about this before, but I think I need to bring it up again, just because it's been coming up. It came up the other day in the live stream, and there's been some direct emails where it's come up. You have to really look at what the situation is and what you wish to accomplish. Now, one of the really frustrating, there is a lot of frustrating parts about this, but one of the really irritating parts about this process is you can feel like you have a slam dunk victory. Like, the court order says that they will not, whatever, they will not look at you on Tuesdays, and they're looking at you on Tuesdays, okay? And you're like, okay, it's easy there. It says clearly what they're supposed to do. They're doing the exact opposite. All I got to do is just waltz into court, say, provide my evidence. It'll be easy, quick, and done. Guys, it doesn't work that way. I've talked about this before, about how every time, in my experience, and in talking to other people, every time it looks like you have a slam dunk scenario and you've caught the other person, they wiggle through it. And I'm not saying that to not fight it, but what I'm saying is you have to be realistic about it. You need to make the determination on if it's really worth it. Now, there's a couple of ways that this can change, but I'll just talk about it from my perspective, and then I'll talk about it from the next perspective. Okay, so from my perspective, I'm not self-represented. I'm doing everything, or I did everything with an attorney, and realistically, if something happened today, I would lean on an attorney to deal with it, right? I'd have to make a decision, and we'll talk about that in the next part. Okay, so you hire an attorney, that's a bunch of money. They are going to file a motion with the court to say, that they're going to do something in contempt, or basically to address your issue. Now, you can go into this thinking, okay, great, I got this issue, we're going to go in, we'll knock it out, we'll talk to the judge, it's going to be crystal clear, and it'll get resolved. Well, that's not typically how it plays out. What happens is you hire your attorney, you start your paperwork. Your ex hires their attorney, they start their paperwork. Then whatever court date you have gets pushed back because there's going to be try to be some settlement agreement, or before, right? Or let's say you do go to court, the judge more than likely is going to try to force you down a settlement agreement anyways. And then if you're close to an agreement, then they'll push the case off, and they'll push it off, and they'll push it off, right? So the problem is that, that starts, one, okay, so it drives up costs, right? Two, what you think is simple isn't simple, because then they're going to come out of the woodwork and start coming up with their own scenarios, their own issues, their own, either truthfully are smeared or exaggerated, whatever, they are not going to just sit there and just take whatever flaming arrows are coming that way and not return fire. It's just they don't operate that way, which that adds a whole nother level of complexity. So now you have two parties who are warring against each other, and if you do finally get in front of a judge, then the judge has to determine what the actual issue is. So that's when I talk about being careful of what you are, careful what you fight for, or pick your battles wisely, because you can't fight everything, right? And so you have the financial part about that, and then you also have the stress and anxiety of what you're dealing with going through it, right? And that's not insignificant either. So you have the initial issue that you're dealing with, and now you're fighting something else. So you got this one issue that's now been drug out to a bunch of different, over a long period of time, and you're dealing with the, the interaction, you're dealing with the statements, and you're dealing with all that stuff. Now, if you're okay with it and it doesn't bother you and it doesn't cause you anxiety, then that's fine. If money's not an issue, then that's fine. I've talked before that if I was in a different financial position and could afford to dump a bunch of money on the ground for an attorney, I would have. I would do every little issue that she, every problem that she caused, every violation of the court order, or every time that she didn't follow the order to co-parent, I would have marched right back into court. And the problem is I'd probably be hundreds upon hundreds of thousands of dollars in debt had I done that. I can't remember if Alex, in his video, which I'll put a link up to the interview with there, I don't remember if he talked about it, but even the stuff that he did self-representing himself, if he would have hired an attorney, it would have cost him $200,000 to $300,000 to get what he ultimately got. Okay, so I talked about if the anxiety issue isn't really a problem, then that's one thing. The money issue, if you don't have money, if you have money and it's not a big deal, fine, go for it. If money is an issue, which for most of it is, that's something to consider. Now, the secondary option on that is the self-representation, or going pro per, or basically where you're going in and you're representing yourself. Like in what I was talking about before in Alex's story, he, after 8 years, has full custody, full parental, his ex's parental rights were erased, and he's completely won. But that was an 8-year battle that he did, but he did it by representing himself. And so, but again, so he looked at it, decided what was important, and fought that. If you remember in the interview, he was talking initially, he did some stuff with an attorney and then figured it out on his own. I probably, if that wasn't an option, he would still be in the situation he was in before. There would still be, joint custody, and the problems would still be ongoing. So he decided to choose his battle and fought for it, and it took a long time to do it. So that, to roll this back into the beginning, that's the problem on this as we go through, not so much fighting for yourself, but it's that initial thing to where you're irritated and you want to fight everything. And if you guys are in that position and you decide to start trying to fight it, and you're under the false, naive impression that it's simple, that it's black and white. It's black and white. My ex has completely violated the court order. This is going to be easy. We'll go in. I'll spend a couple $1,000 if I have an attorney. It'll be over and done with. Guys, typically it doesn't work that way. And then what's going to happen is you're going to want to try to settle it sooner and all that stuff to try to reduce costs. But it's like your only other option would be to go in, force a court hearing, force a trial. But see, even that, right? If you go in for your initial hearing and you don't agree, they send you for a settlement discussion and you guys don't do anything, it doesn't get decided there. They'll turn around and reschedule another hearing to have the process to continue. And I felt, so I never went back to family court, but I fell victim initially thinking that that's the way it would work. And it was rather quickly that my attorney explained to me that, no, it's not the way it works. You don't, no, if you go to court, and that's what happened, right? I'm like, well, screw it. We'll just go to the hearing and say we don't agree and just knock this out. And he goes, well, that's not the way it works. We're going to go to the hearing. We'll say we don't agree. Then they'll tell us to try again, and then they'll schedule another hearing. And then there's, so it's like this big long process, and every one of those one-day things where you're taking your attorney is a couple of $1,000. So anybody who's already gone through this and started this process is probably already experiencing that, right? Where you thought in your mind you had a good idea how this was going to play out, how it would be quick, how you would be able to get some accountability, and then it's just ballooned into this mess. And then what happens is your one issue that your issue that was worth fighting for has probably now turned into 4 or 5 different issues that you're trying to deal with, because the other party is going to try to convolute everything as much as possible. So sometimes you have to, guys. Sometimes you have to fight it. It's so important that you have to, and I get that. But you also have to find a happy medium where you can survive in your environment, right? And sometimes that means certain things. I thought I would have wanted to have taken my ex for not sharing information, right? And I found a way to work around it, right? So I mitigated her control over me, that impact that it had emotionally over me, to get away with it, not to get away with it, to get around it. Whereas had I gone to court, it would have just blown up into a completely different issue. Now, in some ways, if I would have had the money, I kind of wish I would have fought harder, because maybe the situation would have been different. But at the same time, maybe what would have happened is we would have still just ultimately got 50-50. You have to take a realistic look at your situation now, your situation now, what your expectations are, and how you think it legitimately, realistically can play out, okay? And that number 3 is a little different than what your best case scenario is to the worst case scenario, right? So if you go in thinking that you're going to get everything you want right off the bat, typically it doesn't work out that way. So I'm not trying to be negative. I'm not trying to anything like that. All I'm talking about is I know how I felt going through this. I know how irritated I was and how I wanted to hold her accountable on everything. Which is the reason why way back when I was fighting her on email and text about everything she was doing wrong every time she did it, to try to affect change and make things different. And it just doesn't. That never accomplished anything. I've talked about that before. You can't reason with these people. You can't guilt them into feeling bad about what they're doing. You can't shame them into being a better person, a better parent. It's not going to happen. And you'll see that as time goes on. You'll see their actions bear that out right in front of your face. So when you find yourself in a situation where you're really frustrated, take a step back and really look at your situation. Look at what the outcome, what your expectations are, and then really take a look at what you think the realistic result is going to be. Now, if you're being denied visitation or some other really serious issue, then you don't have a choice. But if you guys have had some experience with this and you want to share it with the other people, I know some people currently are going through litigation, so they can't really talk about it too much. But if you can, either give, not give it a thumbs up, but basically, say, yeah, that's true, or give your own perspective. I know there's some people out there who have fought effectively to get custody of their kids. We got a couple of them on the channel, and I know they'll have a different opinion, but they made that choice of what their deal breakers were, and they fought it, and they ultimately won. Now, I guarantee you every one of them has a cost on what it costs to get to that point. Now, ultimately being victorious, kind of erases most of the negatives, but it wasn't easy. All those people that have been successful, it wasn't something that they did, went to court one time, and boom, everything was great. I think the 2 people I remember off the top of my head, well, one is Alex, and the other one I think is Chris. Both took like 8 years to get to that point. It wasn't easy. It wasn't something that they just went in and just won. They hunkered down for the long haul and fought until they finally got what they were trying to get. Okay, so if you guys have some comments, please add that in the comments section below. If you like this video, give it a thumbs up. If you like the channel, please subscribe, and I will talk to you guys on the next video. Take care. Bye.